Hey there, Emmanuel here from WebDevFuel, and in today's video we're going to go over exactly what's the difference between Phoenix LiveView and React. We're going to do a little comparison, and I'm going to try and explain to you exactly which one should you pick for the type of project that you are working on or the project that you're thinking of starting. So with that said, let's hop onto the computer to get started. First of all, let's go over exactly both websites and what they promise and what they tell you about their tools. First of all, LiveView says that they provide a rich real-time user experience with server-side rendering HTML. And as you can see, we have here a bunch of things that they give us inside their documentation. They explain a little bit of how to set it up. But basically, as you can see, it says that the live programming model is declarative, which means that instead of saying once event X happens, change Y on page, which is what happens with React, the events are regular messages which may cause changes to the state. So basically, this means that we send an event from something that happens inside our page, then we either manipulate data, we change data, and then after doing all of those things inside our server, we send back a new socket with either changes or without changes, just the state that we had before. Now React is a little bit different, and here's what they say about it. They say that it is a JavaScript library that is built for building user interfaces. Now this is their goal. This is the thing that you want to be using React for. If you're building complex user interfaces, then React is the thing for you to be using. Now I've gone ahead and I've built here two counters, one counter with React and another one with Phoenix. And as you can see, if we increase it right over here in Phoenix, it increases by 1. If we decrease, it also decreases, and if it is 0, it doesn't go below 0. And the same thing for the counter on React. Now here's exactly how the code for each one of these projects look. First of all, we have here the Phoenix code, the Phoenix LiveView code, and we basically pass here this live thing. Then we define the path, which is the default one. So it is, as you can see here, we have localhost 4000, and then it gives us back the counter live. And we define this counter live in here. So as you can see, we define the module, counter web, which is the application, then counter live, and then we use here the macro that Phoenix provides us. And with that, we can then go ahead and define here our mount function. And in order to mount it, we basically need to pass back an OK here message with an assignment or not. If we don't want to, we could just do a simple socket like this, but in this case we're passing here an assignment of the counter 0. And then in order to increase it or to decrease it, we basically do the following. First of all, we can increase here the counter using an event, and then the event basically increases until infinity, and after we increase it, we define here again the counter, and then we assign a new value inside this our socket. And if we do the same thing for the decrease counter, basically we assign here a counter. So we grab it from the socket assigns counter, but we do something a bit different. We basically say that case counter. So this is something that we can use inside Elixir. This is something that Elixir provides us. And we say the following: case counter, and if the case is 0, so if counter is 0, in case counter is 0, then we simply pass back a no reply, which is what we need to pass instead of passing this OK. We pass here the reply and the socket, and this one basically means that it handles all the other cases. So in case it is not 0, so all other numbers, in case it is all other numbers, we basically assign here the counter to counter -1, and then we pass here a new assignment to the socket with the value of the counter, and this is what makes this right over here happen. Now in terms of HTML, here's exactly how we make this happen. We simply pass in here the counter, so you need to do this little thing right over here in order to add stuff from Phoenix LiveView, or to add basically to add data instead of just HTML, and then in here you need to do this little thing right over here and add counter right over here, and as you can see it becomes 0. Now in order to send these events into Phoenix LiveView, we need to do the following. We need to add here phx click, which means that once we click on this button right over here on this HTML tag, we want to send the event of decrease counter, and once we click on this button right over here, which as you can see it has the plus here, it increases the counter. Now again, this is very declarative. It basically, we send the event of increase and it increases. We send the event of decrease and it either decreases if it's not 0. If it's 0, it simply passes back the web socket. Now as you can see, this is very, very simple, and the fact that this is using WebSockets, so as you can see right over here, we have here WebSockets and their data. The fact that this is happening makes it very easy for us to communicate with the client and the server and exchange information between them, and then display the updated information on our page. Now with React, here's exactly how the code works, and I'm probably sure you're more familiar with this type of code, but let's go ahead and see exactly how this works. Now I've set up here the same way that I've set up with Phoenix LiveView. As you can see here, the styles are defined like normal HTML are, but in the case of React, we define it how they allow us to define it, which we need to pass here this object and then text align center, font size, but whatever. Let's continue. As you can see, we basically do the following in order to assign the default counter. You need to use state. So in the case of Phoenix LiveView, we assign the state on the server and we pass it via the WebSocket. In the case of React, we simply assign the state inside the client and we manipulate it all the time inside the client, and everything happens inside the client. Now, if you're familiar with useState, it gives us here inside this array two different things that we can access, which is the value of the counter and then a function that allows us to set the new counter value. And this is more or less the same thing, but it's not really the same thing. It is a bit different. As I just told you, this all happens inside the client, but basically on click, if we click here on the button that has the minus inside of it, it handles this decrease counter that says that if the counter is different from 0, then we'll set the counter to counter, which is this value that we access right over here, -1. And if we click on the plus button, it accesses basically on click, it actually calls the increase counter function and it increases until infinity. And again, this is all happening inside the client. We are not actually communicating with any kind of server, and the application that I've set up here with React, as you can see, this is just a front-end application that's running JavaScript, but while the case for Phoenix is not that. Phoenix is a server that is running on my local machine, and that is how it communicates and how it exchanges data between the client and the server. Now let's go over exactly what the advantages for React are and what the disadvantages are. The first disadvantage of React is that it is very hard for you to communicate with the server. You always have to communicate it via an API. You have to use the HTTP protocol, you have to use GET, POST, PATCH requests, and that becomes very burdensome if you're trying to build a big application, especially by yourself. The second thing that makes React a bit harder to work with is the security. If you're trying to build, for example, authentication into your application, you're going to be handling a lot of complex stuff, again, because instead of having one application that talks to itself and is tightly integrated, you'll have to make that integration happen via an API. The third thing that you need to keep in mind that is very hard for you to work with React is that it makes it very hard for you to keep the same state between the client and the server. So if you're working with data and, for example, if you're trying to build an application where multiple users need to see the same data at the same time, you really need to write a lot of complex code in order to achieve that. So for example, let's say that you had this counter right over here and that you were trying to increase it, and you had another person on another machine also wanting to increase it and decrease it, this counter. So if you wanted to store the counter value on a server and then make sure that both of your machines had this same value right over here, you had to write a lot of complex code and logic in order to accomplish it. And if you made some mistakes along the way, because you would not be using WebSockets that have a direct communication between the server and the client, you would be left with the possibility of you, for example, having this counter at 8 and another person having at 4. Now the final thing that makes React worse to work with than Phoenix is that you lose a lot of productivity when you work with it. So the 3 reasons I just gave you not only make it complex for you as a developer to make it happen and to build your application, but you'll also lose a lot of productivity. So if you want to build a simple CRUD application where you create, read, update and delete data on your server from the client, and if you simply want to pass data from the client to the server, then React will sort of slow you down, because you'll need to build a lot of complexities that Phoenix does not require in order to achieve this. But the thing that makes React really great are the following 2 things. First of all, you can build very dynamic applications. So if you come back here, you can see that React promises a JavaScript library for building user interfaces, and that is exactly what React is great for. It is great for you to build applications that have highly interactivity between the user and the application. So let's say that you're building something like a drag and drop application, let's say where you, for example, want to have a page builder where you can drag certain type of elements into the page, and then you want the person to see that in real time. In that case, React is great for you to start using it on your project. And the second thing is that you are able to build very snappy application. Now, I'm aware that the first time that someone visits your React application, they have to download the entire JavaScript bundle, and that might make it a little bit slower. But after that, once they start navigating through the pages and they start manipulating the data and interacting with your application, to be more specific, so again, the type of dynamic applications that React is great for, in that case it becomes a very snappy application when compared to Phoenix, because let's say that you want to pass all your dynamic actions through the server. If the connection is slow, then all those actions are going to be slow, not only the first load of the page. Now let's go over exactly what makes Phoenix LiveView great for you to build your project. Now the first thing, just like with React, let's go over first of all the disadvantages. And the first one is again that if someone is trying to use our application in a highly dynamic way and trying, for example, if you want to build again something that is drag and drop, where you have a lot of interactivity inside your application, then Phoenix LiveView is not really the tool for you to be using. Now, I've done a video a couple of days ago, and I'll leave in the comments below a link where I show you exactly how you can build a modal using the Phoenix framework and Alpine.js. But the fact is that in that tutorial I go over something very simple and that is not really highly interactive. So let's say that you're trying to build that in React, you could build that in React, and you could also go ahead and build a simple modal inside Phoenix LiveView. But if you're trying to build a lot of those actions and a lot of interactivity, it can become very complex, the code, over time, and as you start building more features. So for that reason, Phoenix LiveView is not, in that case actually, Phoenix LiveView is not really the perfect solution for your project. Now let's go over the advantages of Phoenix LiveView. And the first one, it is that it is very secure. Now, because you're basically using the entire Phoenix framework and all the tools and all the things that are built for it, you can build a very secure application. and because it is very tightened, because it is very coupled, the code is very coupled, you essentially can build, for example, a user authentication system with a lot of ease, and you can use all the libraries that Phoenix has available that are open source for you to build that user authentication. And then since you have Phoenix LiveView available to you, you can also build all the interactivity at the same time, so you don't really lose anything in the process. The second thing is that while with React, you're not really able to do that in a simple way. Because Phoenix framework uses WebSockets, you are able to basically keep the same state between the client and the server, and if you have multiple users at the same time, they'll always see the same information. Now, if you go online and you search for Phoenix LiveView and Phoenix framework tutorials, you'll see that there's a lot of tutorials that teach you how to build real-life chat applications. And that's a great example of an application where two users are talking inside a chat that's live, that's happening live, and you need to have them seeing the same messages at the same time, and you need them to see the same data, and the data cannot be lost, for example, when the communication is happening between the server and the client, and Phoenix LiveView is great for that use case. And finally, what I believe that makes Phoenix LiveView and the entire Phoenix framework really great, it is the productivity. Basically, you are able to be very productive while you are building your application. As you just saw in the example that I showed you of this Phoenix LiveView counter, you can basically set up the router, then you set up your Phoenix LiveView module, and then you set up your template and you're good to go. You can start building an entire application from there. So the reason that is great is because you're not really, again, doubling the code. You're not writing the code logic in the client and then writing the code logic in the server and then having to speak via an API between those things. And for that reason, Phoenix is a great framework because it allows you again to be very productive, and you're able to build the same application, especially if it is a basic application like a CRUD application, like a to-do list, like a task management application. Those kinds of things are great for you to build using Phoenix, because then the data that you are transferring between the client and the server, it is transferred in a very efficient way in terms of code specifically, and for that reason it allows you to build an application in, I'd say, half the time that you would spend building it on React with a, let's say, Node.js or Django backend. I hope this video made you understand a little bit better exactly what are the differences between React.js and Phoenix LiveView. And again, they are not really better than the other one. Phoenix is not better than React, and React is not better than Phoenix. The fact is that they are really different. They are good for each use case, and I really hope that you understood in which type of project you should pick Phoenix or React. Now, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like below, let me know in the comments exactly what you liked about it, and also subscribe for more content like this.